Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Inside Scoop. And we're back again today with Sensormatic to have another conversation about what's happening out there. And this conversation is a result of some curiosity, right, about what's happening with EAS out in the real world. What are retailers considering? What are they thinking about? There's been some rumors flying around that people may be thinking about pulling EAS out of their stores. And so we wanted to get to the root of it and find out what was really happening. So got together with Sensormatic and conducted a survey. And so we got some really interesting results back that we're going to talk about today in depth. And before we get into all that, we have our guests today are Kelly Brooks and Jacque Kress with Sensormatic. And I would love, Kelly, if you want to kick us off and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do at Sensormatic.
Sure. My name is Kelly Brooks. I'm the Business Development Manager of Merchandise Protection Solutions for Sensormatic. So I handle any of the technologies that are related to merchandise protection.
Great. And how long have you been at Sensormatic, Kelly?
It was just 23 years, a few days ago.
Nice. Happy anniversary.
Wow. Thanks.
Great. And Jacque?
Yes, Jacque Kress. I am responsible for the RFID business for Sensormatic. That entails both our inventory solutions, which helps with inventory accuracy, as well as our shrink analyzer business, which is utilizing RFID at the exit. So anything RFID, my team handles.
Awesome. And then my co-host today, I'm not going to say partner in crime because Kevin always says that, but my co-host is Jacque Brittain. Jacque, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. It's Jacque Brittain. I'm the editorial director at LP Magazine. It's great to be here today.
Great. And so Jacque is pretty crucial when we put together these surveys. He puts together the results and generates the survey results. But before we jump into the meat of that, I would love to hear from you, Kelly and Jacque, about what was the impetus behind doing this survey?
Yeah, so we had been in a lot of customer meetings over the last few years where customers had discussed that they had tested removing hard tags and had shared some of the results, which were not favorable. Last November, Jacque hosted a smart exit workshop in Auburn. And as part of the conversation, it just kind of revolved around tags. And a lot of the top leaders started speaking about their experience and the results that they had, and were sharing it with other leaders who were thinking about it or had discussed it with their store ops as potentially doing it to save on labor. And the conversation just sort of grew and was really interesting. And we could have probably gone on at that workshop for a couple more hours, but we had to stick to the agenda that Jacque had set forth. So we decided to kind of find a way to continue the conversation amongst retailers.
Yeah. And Kelly's right. I mean, it was a topic that we didn't have a lot of time in the agenda for. We weren't expecting a big conversation. And when the topic came up about potentially removing hard tags and it because of RFID and new tools available, should they be removing those hard tags? And it was a pretty interesting response from the room right away. I mean, all the hands flew up wanting to comment on what they've done, what they've experienced. And we knew we wanted to address it back with the broader industry as we came out of that event.
Yeah, I think one of the things that retailers are really good about is performing tests. They test everything, especially when there's pressure on labor, from operations to reduce and find some savings. Were you guys surprised to hear that this is being tested?
Yeah, I'll jump in. No, I mean, we weren't surprised at all. I think, over the years, especially as RFID has grown, especially in the apparel segment, there have been conversations of, well, do I need to stop, or can I stop putting the hard tags on now that I have RFID? And I think, we weren't surprised at all the conversation started. I think what surprised us was just the overwhelming reaction of, especially now with what's going on with ORC, what's going on in the retail stores, retailers need as many tools at their disposal as they can get. Different tools that do different things. And the hard tags that we see is such a fantastic visual deterrent. And just because you've implemented RFID for inventory accuracy or for loss prevention use cases, that doesn't mean that a hard tag program isn't going to be successful. And so we weren't surprised that it came up. I think we were surprised by the number of retailers who said, yeah, we've tested this, we feel strongly, and here's the response that we've seen from our stores.
Yeah.
And I was going to add that I think that, some of the numbers were that the shrink rose 40 to 70%. And I think that was part of the desire to continue the conversation, because we knew other retailers were thinking of it, and the ones that had done it kind of got them to stop and pause. And since then, they've asked for the messaging or some of the survey results or numbers to share with their leadership or their store ops who may be pushing to test this. And hey, we shouldn't even test this because we need to consider that this is what the shrink results could be in this period of time.
Yeah, I think, over the years, we've taught people what EAS tags are, right? So the general public knows basically what does this thing do that's on this item. And so Kelly, you and we had a pre-call and you were talking about specifically some things that happened that were a surprise, right? That there was kind of a rise in some violence. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, some of the customers that had tested it said that there were things aside from shrink, that went up, that they noticed an increase in aggressive behavior, in taunting the employees based on what the laws were in certain jurisdictions, that there was a safety factor, which I know we've had a lot of conversations around how the safety of the employees people are quitting because they don't feel safe. And that was increased as well by not having the visual deterrent of the EAS tags.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's the public knows, they know what this thing does and it's not there anymore. They're, okay, haha, we're walking out the door.
Right.
Right. It's crazy. So all of that sort of led to this survey, which I would love, Jacque, if you could kind of take us through just a really high level review of what the survey was.
Yeah, let's start with how we put the survey together. We basically took and we used the survey platform that most people are familiar with. The idea is to collect the information anonymously. We want people to be free and open about the way that they approach their answers to the questions that we pose. Another thing that we wanted to do here was look at this at an industry level. Rather than just talking to the leaders, we also wanted to get the responses of the folks in the field and how they felt about it. Now, we are able to segregate the answers and see what the overall response was to the different questions that we asked. And then we also took a look at how the leaders responded to it as well to see if there were any major differences in the way that we were looking at the results of the survey. The survey itself took place over the course of about a month. We used different social media platforms to take a look at those results. We didn't just use the magazine. We also used LinkedIn and some of the other major sites out there to get our responses. And from that point, we set it out and we got the questions that we asked. We didn't just come up with the questions ourselves. Of course, we asked for the opinions of the subject matter experts out there on what specific types of questions that we felt we should ask, considering that, the industry evolves on a regular basis. The solution providers that are out there want to make sure that the tools that we're using are continuously improved based on the methods and practices that we have in the field. So that input becomes very important to the way we approach the survey. From that point, we launched the survey. We encourage people to not only answer the questions that we have, but also pose their comments where we felt it was appropriate for them to give us a little bit more information. So.
Yeah, and I'd say that, some of the results were a little surprising. Others, sort of fit with the narrative that's out there. Was there anything, Jacque, that stood out to you as either surprising or supporting our existing theories?
Honestly, I was actually a little surprised myself on the number of retailers that have actually tested removing the tags. That to me was a little bit of a surprise as we kind of launched this whole thing. I would get that some folks are out there testing it. I was just a little surprised at the number of different retailers out there that actually put put those tests forward. Yeah, I mean, we ended up with 46% of the companies out there that actually said that they considered removing the EAS tags, but quite honestly, I was actually surprised by how high that number was.
Right. Any surprises, Jamie or Kelly, for the two of you?
Yeah, I'll say, I agree with what you're saying, Jacque. I think we hear a lot about retailers who are testing removal of the hard tags. I think it goes straight back to labor. I mean, with the labor model in these stores, the retailers are challenged with you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, right? You want to extend the labor to put those hard tags on because you realize the importance of it, but you just have limited labor. And where do I allocate that labor most effectively? Is it on selling? Is it on replenishing? Is it putting on these tags or is it making omni-channel picks? And oftentimes they can't do it all with one or two people in the morning to open up a store. So we hear about it a lot. And from where I sit in the RFID space, a lot of what we provide is data. It's not tangible, right? And it's great information, and we love the information coming out of these, out of these smart exits and out of RFID. But on the bad side of it is there's no visual deterrent. They see the same old pedestals they've always seen or overheads. They still see the video. And the importance of having that visual deterrent of these hard tags is what has really, in the last 3 years especially, become important. And that's where Kelly spends all of her days, is talking about how do I protect this merchandise with the visual deterrent as well as all the other deterrents that we have our hands in.
Well, the other thing that I would point out, Jamie, is looking at the results. There were a lot of positive things that I saw as well when you start looking at things. The importance of employee engagement, the importance of customer service when we're using these tools, and making sure that we're using those different factors together to come up with the proper solution, I think is something that really stands out. I mean, when you look at some of the results here, between extremely important and important, we had about 98% of respondents that felt that it was extremely important that we supported the tools through the different customer engagement practices that we have. And customer service obviously is a big part of that as well. So just like any solution out there that we have, it becomes really clear when you look at the survey that the results of a particular solution also requires the appropriate engagement of the customers and the associates, and putting it all together to make sure that a solution is most effective.
Good point, Jacque. Kelly, what about you? Did you see anything that surprised you?
Yeah, no, I would say, some of it I'd heard because I'm very close to this, right? But I think that what was, the key takeaway is, retailers are trying to find a way to integrate all these current LP solutions that they have and maximize the benefits, and then eliminate technologies that they may not need. And we're kind of at a pivotal point where most of our customers are now at least exploring or having the conversation around RFID, which is they're looking at, how do we implement this? Do we need this technology if we're going to have RFID? And I think the takeaway was that, yes, you still need the visual deterrent, but exploring, does it make sense for certain retailers? It may make sense to use a dual tech hard tag. For others, it may not. It depends on their past investment. If they've already made a substantial investment into EAS, you're not going to want to just get rid of it. So I think that that's kind of where the conversation's at. And, not all retailers are going to be the same, but what makes the most sense for each retailer. And that's why, Jamie's team and my team tries to work together with each customer, because no two situations are alike on what's best for the customer.
And what's interesting, Kelly and I talk a lot about this because, we'll go in and do surveys of stores, and we'll see merchandise locked up, right? We all see it in every store, especially in certain markets where there might be more of an ORC problem than others. And even where we sit at Sensormatic, we understand the challenge. It's a razor thin wire between how do I protect my merchandise, how do I protect my employees, how do I but still give access to the shoppers to the merchandise that they want to look at and feel. And that's kind of the challenge that we have with talking to every retailer we meet with is how do we give you the right mix of security without taking away the ability for the customer to touch and feel the merchandise that they want to buy. And it's getting harder and harder for retailers to figure out where is that happy medium.
Agreed, 100%. And, one of the questions we asked too, we were asking about what other measures have you taken to mitigate the possible removal of EAS tags or labels? And some of these solutions could be pretty expensive, right? So added cameras, added technology like AI and things like that could be quite expensive. I would argue that EAS tags, which are already in store, might be one of the least expensive ways to help deter your theft, right? It's once you put it on there, there's no more labor involved. It sits there. There might be a little bit of labor when it's removed at the end, but I think it's probably one of the lowest cost ways you could prevent theft.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the greatest first line of defense for sure. And I think that's we talk a lot about what are all the tools that a retailer has at their disposal to help reduce shrink and to help deter would-be theft. And it's a mix. There's no perfect, one strategy by itself is not going to be the perfect strategy. So we work closely with each retailer to understand what's their store environment, what's their current staffing levels, and what are the right mix of tools. And what I found years ago when RFID first started, there was the hope or the promise that, oh, well, now that we put RFID on things, we can do away with hard tags eventually, and we can utilize some of that budget. And that was an active conversation 7 years ago. And what we've learned today, and unfortunately, crime and shrink has increased substantially since those days, is those two things can and should operate in a complementary fashion. You don't need to choose, am I going to go RFID or am I going to go to a visual deterrent hard tag? They both serve, quite frankly, very different purposes at different times in the customer journey. RFID is largely a post-event analysis, looking at data, looking to close more cases on a faster way. The hard tag, however, and the other merchandise protection strategies in the store is around how do I actually stop this item from initially being stolen. So I think those things can operate in a complementary fashion and should. And there shouldn't be a discussion going on of, well, we decided to go with RFID, so now do we need to get rid of these hard tags?
Agreed. I think one of the questions they asked, what do you think is the biggest game-changing tool coming? And RFID was right up there with some other technologies. I think AI was one. Kelly, do you agree with Jamie? Do you see these two tools working together?
Absolutely, I do. As we said, certain retailers don't have a need for hard tags, right? They have hard goods. So it depends on the retailer, but our takeaway has been that they will coexist. Our belief at Sensormatic, I guess, is that they will coexist for years to come together.
The other thing to think about is, when historically when we've looked at the visual deterrent of the hard tag, I mean, certainly there's lots of different tag choices out there. One of the things that helps those two solutions to operate in a complementary way is you now have the ability to say, certain items in my store may not lend themselves to a hard tag strategy, whether it's the size or how the product is displayed. Well, if there's an RFID tag on that product, now you have that item protected, at least at the exit, at least so you can see what left, so you can replenish those items to the store, while you go ahead and put the hard tags on those categories that lend themselves to putting those tags on. So you actually become it's easier to protect the entire store, because between RFID and hard tags, for example, you're able to protect more merchandise across a varied amount of categories.
So, Jamie, you and I had conversations about self-checkout in the past, and I almost hate to go down this road, but I mean, it stands out to me like an elephant in the room. One of the questions was about employee engagement, which Jacque mentioned. And, the people who responded, it's through the roof, how important employee engagement is. And yet we're talking about self-checkout, right? So this is removing employees from the equation almost. So how do we sort of marry these two things, right? So how do we have employee engagement, but have a frictionless experience for the customer? I know I'm going off tangent a little bit, but
Yeah, no, I'll answer from my perspective. I think Kelly has probably a broader experience in understanding the labor side in the stores. My perspective is, as I was mentioning, you've got limited labor and you got to figure out where am I going to deploy that labor in my store. And if self-checkout is the right solution, you might be redeploying that labor to the selling process. So that employee is in the aisles with the customers, and helping them, look for the merchandise they want, get different sizes, et cetera. So you're having that visual cue of the employee in the aisles of the store. They may not be at the self-checkout machine, but there's still a big awareness that the stores are staffed and there's people keeping an eye on the comings and goings in the store. That would be my first inclination. Kelly, I don't know what your perspective is.
Yeah, no, I mean, to your point, right? Self-checkout is kind of here because labor has continued to be an issue, whether it's finding staffing or quality staffing or where labor wages are at. But now we're hearing how the shrink is so bad for retailers. So they're finding a balance in that technology as well. One thing that was surprising about the survey, though, is it was almost unanimous that the engagement of the employees with the customer was crucial for sales and for shrink. And you really don't have that at the self-checkout experience. So it kind of was almost like things have come full circle. And it'll be interesting to see as we hear more and more retailers are pulling away from self-checkout, how that looks. From a merchandise protection standpoint, obviously there's the challenge, and part of the reason we created the one-piece infusion tag was because it doesn't involve the customer handling a pin. There are retailers that are using it. There are some that have associates that still have to physically go and help remove the tags, but that's another area, just like RFID and hard tags, that the conversation is evolving, and back to everyone's just trying to figure out what technologies make the most sense and how you holistically get them to work together, and the best way to get an ROI and keep your sales up and your shrink down.
Yeah.
I would ask how exactly for those out there that aren't as familiar with the field people, let's go there. How do we best get these tools to work together without sending our costs through the roof? I think that would be something that a lot of folks out there are going to ask about and wonder about.
Yeah, I think, just like retailers are actively testing the removal of tags, and we know the results of how that has worked out. I think evaluating how running pilots with customers has been really beneficial. Going into a retailer setting and saying, okay, what are the objectives that you're trying to get across here? Are you trying to minimize labor impact? Are you trying to be more restrictive in certain stores where you're seeing a rise in ORC? There's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. So piloting and testing different mixes of solutions is really key. Kelly mentioned our Smart Exit workshop. We've found just great results with our customers who are utilizing these smart exits, which is looking at everything leaving the store, utilizing video, comparing that to what went through point of sale or didn't go through point of sale to see if it's a without sale event or not. And we're not saying that has to be in every single store. There might be some stores where that solution makes a lot of sense. There might be some stores where you don't want to have as much of a significant investment in hardware or technology at the exits. So you want to deploy other types of solutions, which might involve more of the hard tags, more of the visual deterrence. So I think it's a mix, and you can accomplish a lot by testing those in different markets to see where that sweet spot sits.
So it also sounds like you're saying, rather than just coming up with a blanket solution, they really need to work with you to figure out what works best based on their specific environment, the company culture, the products that they're selling, all these different factors that come into making those decisions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Kelly, you probably see a much broader product mix than I even see, because most of my time, certainly the adoption in apparel has been where RFID has sat for the last several years. Now it's broadening out. We're seeing electronics and some other categories. But Kelly, you have much more experience in a broader set of categories.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jamie, to your point on the proof of concept, like one thing we're doing with several retailers is you don't have to roll out RFID and tag everything in the store. We have, for example, we're doing one pilot with a retailer and it's only their high shrink items over a certain threshold. Certain retailers are easier to work with because maybe at their distribution center, they already segregate those high shrink items. So just those will get the label on it at the distribution center. But really, we just try to Jamie's point, work with them and say, what are your objectives? What is your budget? What current solutions do you have? And try to figure out what makes the most sense on their goals and, their needs.
The other thing, one other thing I'll say, Jacque, I was saying you don't need to put the smart exits in every store, but what has been interesting in our broadest evaluation of our shrink analyzer solution is it brings to light areas of shrink that we didn't know were happening at certain times of day. So you can all of a sudden be looking at a store, you knew you had a shrink problem, but you didn't necessarily know when it was happening, how it was happening. And all of a sudden, using RFID technology, you can start to see we're having a lot more shrink occur between 10 a.m. and noon than we ever thought. We would have assumed it was maybe later in the day when you had a different staffing level than you do at the opening of the store. So utilizing the data from some of your smart exit stores to then help you identify the other strategies you want to deploy in the other stores has also been quite helpful with our pilot customers.
So the biggest thing you guys have going for you too at Sensormatic is just all of your years of experience. I mean, you know how to run a proof of concept. You can advise the customer on what's the best way. And it's amazing, just, coming from solution provider side myself, how many retailers don't really know how to run a really good proof of concept. Setting up control stores, making sure that you're comparing like to like. Those are all really important things in order to support the numbers at the end, right? Kelly, in your shoes, right? So you could be working with a customer and also some other customers in the same area and be able to advise them on what's working in that area. It might be geographic or a type of store. So that can't be talked about enough, is just the amount of experience you guys have.
There's a lot of tenure for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So with that said, with these survey results, we're going to kind of wrap it up here in a couple minutes, but I want to end on this note. Any future strategies that you see maybe being developed from these survey results, or are you sharing these with customers? What do you think?
So I know we've had customers that were there and weren't taking notes and wanted some of the information, or there's been dialogue throughout the industry and they heard about the event and they heard about this conversation and have reached out and asked, and without sharing the retailer, we can tell them what the dialogue was so that they can take that to their leadership who wants to remove tags and potentially say, hold on, here's why we shouldn't. And if we want to do it, let's do it in baby steps, right? Maybe take one category off and see, rather than make the mistake that some other retailers made of really removing it and paying the cost of doing so.
Yeah, let's not go crazy, right? Let's just baby steps. How about from you, Jamie?
I agree. I think we will be having our third annual Smart Exit event at Auburn this November. So anybody watching this podcast is welcome to contact either Kelly or myself and get some information about that event. It's a great event for the retailers and the loss prevention community to come together and talk about these strategies and what everybody is doing a little bit differently. Different technologies and how you combine those technologies to get the right mix. I think there are so many solutions out there right now, and it's almost overwhelming for the customers. There's physical solutions like we've talked about, and that's everything from a pedestal to the tags to other solutions in the store. But then behind the scenes, there's all the other areas that retailers are looking at, what they can do with the data, from the data that we're collecting in the stores, goes to the investigators, and then from there it goes to lots of other tools out there in the marketplace, and it's really overwhelming. And part of the goal of this event that Kelly and I put on is helping retailers look at the broad assortment of all the different technologies that are out there, and how do they choose the right mix, because let's face it, not everybody has unlimited resources, and we can't just keep doing pilots of different technologies. You want to narrow it down to what you think are the top 3, 5, 10 solutions that make the most sense. And that was really the most fun part for me of this event last year, was everybody just coming together as a community and coming up with different ideas and working together and wanting to keep talking as a community, not so much as individual retailers.
Well, great. It sounds like an awesome event. Hopefully LPM will be invited to that.
Absolutely.
Jacque, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned all these different technologies that are being used out there and how overwhelming that they could potentially be. Can you just talk briefly about how Sensormatic goes about working with the stores, the teams that are out there, to make sure that they're educated on the appropriate way to use the tools that are available to them?
Kelly, maybe you start with what you do in the merchandise protection, and I'll kind of talk about my side.
Yeah, so I think, Jacque, it depends on what the technologies are that we have provided to them, right? And then some of them we do collaborate with other integrators, and we've had several pilots going together of tying together our solutions with theirs. I think that goes back to the conversation of retailers are trying to figure out how to tie it all together, and you hear a lot around the term ecosystem. And so we're just trying to collaborate with those integrators on how we can tie what we have in with what they can. And I think as technology advances, that's going to become even easier to do in the very near future.
Yeah, agreed with that. And what we often see in the RFID space, I mean, this was the first statement I heard years ago with when Macy's first kicked off with RFID. Let's not try to boil the ocean. What is the core problem we're trying to solve? And everyone in the company is going to have a lot of different things they want to try to do with this technology or with the technologies that they're testing, but stay true to the core problem you're trying to solve. And I think you can even subset that with shrink. You can say, yes, we're all trying to solve shrink problems, but are there certain high shrink categories that we want to go after first? And as Kelly mentioned, we've run a pilot with a customer identifying those high shrink categories and solving for those categories first. And then we can expand from there because you'll learn what the right way to do that is. So I think that's key, whether you're doing an RFID program for inventory or whether you're doing an RFID program for improving your shrink, staying true to what the top 3 KPIs are that you're trying to solve before you try to boil the ocean with all the fun stuff, all the other things that happen downstream once you put in these technologies.
Good stuff. I think on that note, Jamie, I mean, that pretty much sums up what we're talking about, right? Is let's keep it simple. Let's not just yank a program out because we feel like it's the right thing to do. Let's do some research, baby steps, as you mentioned, Kelly. All of these things I think are super important for retailers. So with that, I know we will be putting out this podcast and probably just a little summary about the survey as well. And I'm sure we'll have more conversations with Sensormatic in the future. You guys have been great. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, Jacque, for stepping on with us.
Yep.
And
thank you very much.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you at Hoover.
All right.
Thank you.